All right, let's talk about Donald Trump and the election of 2024. Hey guys, it's me, Helena, and welcome back to my channel where we talk all about astrocartography and locational astrology. And today I want to talk about astrology in regards to the United States, Donald Trump, the election, and leading up to the Uranus return, Uranus and Gemini, in 2025. First things first, I want to point out that to be a good astrologer, you need to be able to study patterns and correlations with a neutral, unbiased perspective. And as someone who is a messenger, that's what an astrologer is, we're a messenger of data. It is so important that I look at history, look at patterns, and look at the future with an unbiased perspective, which is what I do when I do astrology work. The minute that we allow our emotions to color our predictive abilities is the minute that we start not being able to see the whole picture and not be able to fully zoom out and get an accurate reading, an accurate understanding of what's happening. Now, all of the things that I am about to say in this video have nothing to do with my own political beliefs or my own values, but rather I am acting as a messenger to give information based on what will be happening during the election of 2024 in regards to Donald Trump's chart. And the last thing I want to mention is that I am a modern Western astrologer using whole sign houses, the tropical zodiac, and I do use Hellenistic techniques. I use zodiacal releasing, annual perfections. That is my method of astrology. And if you do like Vedic astrology, I will recommend this video down below that I watched that I thought was really interesting. I'll include that down below if you wanted to get another perspective on basically, it's very similar predictions to what I'm going to be sharing in this video, but using a different system in astrology. All right, let's get into the predictions.
So here is Donald Trump's zodiacal releasing. And zodiacal releasing is one of my favorite timing techniques that I use. It's an ancient timing technique, traditional timing technique from the 1st century BC. And this is really, really fascinating. I have plenty of videos and blog posts that I've written and created on the topic, which you can find here. But this shows his life biography, and we're looking at the lot of spirit, which is his career and his overall life direction. And here's the thing that's really interesting. Okay, so his lot of fortune's in Aquarius. So if we apply the lot of fortune to the other fixed signs, we can see here that he had a minor peak period in his life when he was 26 to 34 years old, 1973 to 1980. That was a career peak for him. And then he, was completing and winding down that in this completion period from 34 to 54 years old. In 2000, he began a preparatory period, which is a building up period of life, of building the foundation for something. What's really interesting is he's going to activate his moderate peak period in April of 2025. This is a really big deal. Level 1 periods in zodiacal releasing are sections in a person's biography. So if you want to think of zodiacal releasing like a book or a biography, we've got the sections or parts of your book. You can open up that section and find the chapters, which are the specific years. You can open up that chapter of those years within paragraphs, which are the specific months of when things are happening, and then the specific days, which is like the sentence within the paragraph, within the chapter, within the part. So that's kind of like you're reading a book of a person's life. And this is a big deal when we have a peak period on a person's level 1, because it's their entire part of their story is really heightened. And a peak period is not good. It's not bad. It's not positive. It's not challenging. It is just an activated time of importance, significance, and busyness. There's a lot of activity during peak periods. It's kind of like if you were reading your biography or someone's biography. It's like those parts of the story when there's a lot happening for them in their life, or there's a lot of activations happening in their life. Now, he's going to activate a moderate peak period in April of 2025. This is after the election. This is right after the election. This is, 6 months after the election. But the other thing that's really interesting is he does have Mars here in Leo. So how we could, go further into zodiacal releasing is we'd look to see where Leo is in his chart. And we can see here with Leo, he has Mars in Leo, and Mars is his malefic in his chart. So it is a challenging period for him with having the malefic in Leo. So this is challenging. However, it is very activated. Now we could go even further into this. Let's go back a little bit. Let's see where he is right now. Really interesting in when he was campaigning for the first election of 2016, as he was campaigning and building that momentum, he was in a Taurus period of his life. That Taurus period, that peak period, was a very important time for him, that campaign. We're going to have a second round of that in November of 2024. November of 2024, we're cutting back to that theme of Taurus being a peak activated time for him right after the election. So we're looking at zodiacal releasing. This is just one part of the story. We're also going to look at transits. But it's really interesting how he's in the build-up phase right now. On August 29th of 2023, he began a preparatory period. He's building up to this peak time, a similar theme that came up for him fall of 2015 into the spring of 2016, that campaign time. He is activating that again right after the election. And this is a peak period that then propels him into level 1 peak period of his life for 20 years, roughly. It's a big deal. It's a big deal when you have a level 1 peak period. And it's just interesting to see this correlation between, when he was campaigning and doing very well in the campaign and, looking ahead at the future right after the election. I also want to show you his transits. All right, so here I've pulled up the transits for election day, November 8th of 2024. So first thing I noticed right off the bat is I want to look at his annual perfections for the year. And this is a timing technique called annual perfections. I just made a video on it. I will include that video here if you want to learn more about how to do this in your own life, how to make your own predictions. If we look at the year 2024, around his birthday, when he's 78 years old, he's going to be activating the Aquarius house in his life for that year and Saturn. And so this is a timing technique where we can see, okay, what's of utmost importance? What's really, an important thing that we're seeing in this chart? What's kind of the narrowed focus and the planet to prioritize when we're looking at transits? Because the thing about transits is there's just so many moving parts. There's so many things always changing and moving and shifting that if we want to get some clarity on what we should focus in on first, I look to the annual perfected house and the ruler, the lord of that house. So how you'd use this is you'd look to that area of life. So 7th house of partnerships, allies will be activated for that year of life. So I'm going to be looking at transits that go through this area. And the other thing I'd be looking at is his natal Saturn, as well as transiting Saturn, because that transiting Saturn is the most important planet for that year, as well as his natal Saturn, seeing what aspects or other relationships are being made to his natal Saturn. His natal Saturn is strong. It's making a sextile to Uranus, which is innovation and new things, different things, shakeups. We can also see that Neptune is at 27 degrees Pisces at the time of the election, and it is trining both his Saturn and his natal Pisces. Venus trine Pisces. Venus trine Neptune is a very alluring, magnetic, mystical energy, but also that Saturn, right? Because we're really prioritizing that Saturn in this chart because it's the perfected Lord of the year. And Saturn is being positively received by Neptune. Neptune is supporting that Saturn in this spot. So first off, right off the bat, the perfected house and the ruler and transit Saturn is all positively aspected. So that's the first thing I'm seeing. There's some ease with those planets. It doesn't look difficult. It doesn't look like there's a challenge per se. There is support and a flow with the relationships between these planets. Now, the other thing that we have to talk about, right? The elephant in the room. The main thing that I want to talk about with this chart, and this is why it looks so good for him, is he has Jupiter on his north node, conjunct his north node at the time of the election in the 11th house of the followers, the audience, the people who follow him. The 11th house is networks, organizations, friends, and it's also the people who follow him and support him. It's also what rewards the dreams, the hopes that we get from our career. He's got Jupiter, his benefic in his chart. Jupiter, it moves once every 12 years. It's a slow moving planet, and it brings excess, abundance, a lot of something, abundance, growth, excess. There's an optimism with Jupiter. It's going right on his north node and his sun. Jupiter on sun. I mean, this is achievement. Jupiter on sun is also arrogance and pride and hubris, but Jupiter on sun is usually a very positive thing to see in a transit for someone. There's a growth, there's an achievement, there's a success. Jupiter on Uranus, activation of something unexpected happening. This is all happening in Gemini. And we're going to talk about the lead up to the Uranus return, which is a really big deal for the United States. And we'll talk about that, but that's going to be happening right after this election. But the other thing is Uranus. The planet of upheaval, change, chaos, unexpected things happening. Uranus transits are really important to look out for when we're looking at someone's life. Anytime you've got Uranus going over a personal planet or angle, or it's making a tight aspect, like a square, a trine, an opposition within 1 or 2 degrees, that is very precise in something unexpected, some change happening to someone. Uranus is on his MC, career, visibility, public status, and reputation. His career is ruled by Venus. Venus is in the 12th house. A lot of politicians and presidents have a lot of planets in the 12th house because the 12th house rules secrets or private things. That Venus is beautifully aspected. His career, the ruler of his career, supported by aspects. Neptune is supporting the ruler of his career, and Uranus is sextiling his Venus, the ruler of his career. This looks very positive. The ruler of his career is very supported at this time. Now, I am just looking at the election. I am looking at the election and this time right after the election, and everything in terms of his career and his growth and the fame and the being seen and the followers, there's a lot of support here. It looks very good for Donald Trump during this time. Now, the thing I want to talk about is the Uranus return of the United States, because the Uranus return of the United States will be happening a few years after, around the time when Trump enters his peak period of his life career. And what's really interesting is, let's move forward a little bit. All right. I've pulled up 3 charts here: Donald Trump's chart, the US Sibley chart, and the transits for when we're having the United States Uranus return. We can see here that Uranus will be conjunct the US Uranus, right? So it's a return. It's bringing back the themes. Now, Uranus moves once every 8 years. It's a very slow moving planet. It moves once every 84 years. It goes around the zodiac. The last time we've had Uranus in Gemini, or the Uranus return of the United States, was World War II, was the Civil War. The time before that was the American Revolutionary War. There's consistently been a theme of war when Uranus makes a return to the US Uranus and Gemini. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up Donald Trump with this is whether or not he's elected, whether or not, he becomes president, his legacy, what he built in the years prior, there is somewhat of a theme trickling in what the Uranus return story will be about. And the reason for that is, we can see here Uranus returning to the Uranus in Gemini, and look at that. He was born, Trump has his sun in Gemini, conjunct the North Node, a volume up significance and importance, conjunct Uranus, and he was born under a lunar eclipse in Gemini. The Uranus return of the US, whether or not he becomes president, whether or not he wins the election, whatever this Uranus return story, it has something to do with him. Whether it's, his message, what he stood for, the foundation of what the things he were talking about, these things, there's some sort of linkage or story connecting this. So he is part of the story of the Uranus return of the United States that is happening for 8 years between 2025 and 2032, 2033. The lead up to Uranus and Gemini is the election of 2024. And we have seen repeatedly throughout history the correlations between the tensions among countries and people leading up to Uranus and Gemini, the Uranus return of the United States. There's always a period of a buildup of tension before that. And this election is the buildup to the Uranus return of the US. I highly recommend a YouTube video that is really, really fascinating about the Uranus return of the United States. It's from the Astrology podcast. So I'll include that video link down below if you want to learn about it, because it's super in depth. It's like 4 hours long. It's really cool to study the history and the correlations and the patterns, because often in history, there are themes that echo or themes that come up again. The archetypal theme of those planets and their movements and the transits, there are correlations that we can study repeatedly throughout history. And that's how astrologers make predictions, is we look back in time and neutrally observe the history and make predictions based on the similar planetary alignments. One thing I do want to say about this Uranus return is when we look at the US Sibley chart, which was signed on the Declaration of Independence in 1776, 1776 was when we had the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. Notice how Mars is conjunct Uranus in the chart in Gemini. The Uranus return has a story to do with Mars conjunct Uranus. What is Mars conjunct Uranus? It's conflict. It's confrontation. It's an explosive volcanic eruption of something simmering under the surface that needs to explode. Mars is action. It's in Gemini, so there's a communicative disagreement, tension within words or thoughts or ideas. Conjunct Uranus, explosive, erratic, out of nowhere, out of left field. What we have seen repeatedly with Uranus returns, with the Uranus in Gemini periods for the US, is there's always conflict, whether it's external, like World War II, whether it's the Civil War of 1863. One thing I do really want to point out about the Civil War was in 1861, we had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. We're going to be having that again in Aries during the time of the Uranus return of the United States. Saturn-Neptune is a big, important conjunction for the country. And that happened during the Civil War in 1861. So we're seeing more patterns and themes, right? Neptune, slow-moving planet. Saturn, slow-moving planet. When they come together, that's an important thing to note. And that will be happening during the Uranus return. There will also be an eclipse going over the United States immediately after the election of 2024. Eclipses are not easy. They are not positive. They're not supportive. They are periods of tension. And so that Mars-Uranus is literally baked into the chart, the US story. And so when we get a transit like Uranus, a massive transit that takes 84 years to move around, and it comes back to where it is here, we're not only bringing up the Uranus and Gemini story, we're also bringing up Uranus conjunct Mars story. And Uranus conjunct Mars is war. It is conflict. It is not easy. It is simmering, explosive behavior. So there's a lot of data here. We've looked at the transits. We've looked at the Lord of his career and how that's aspected. We've looked at his annual perfected house and planet, nicely aspected. We also looked at his zodiacal releasing, which is a really big, big deal. There's also a story linking what happens after the election in the United States for 8 years, and we can link it back to Trump because he has a Sun North Node Uranus conjunction born under a lunar eclipse in Gemini when this Uranus return will be happening for the United States. There is a link, there is a story, there is a theme. Now, does this mean I am predicting Trump will win? No. Does this mean that his chart looks really good around the time of the election? Yes. It looks very supportive for him at the election of 2024. Whether or not he's elected, that's a different story. But there's a lot happening for him in the coming years, especially activating, a peak period of his life. And if we look at the United States in the coming years, in the next 2 to 4 years, 8 years, it looks absolutely wild. And so I say all this because it's good to have this information. If it were Trump versus Biden, Trump's chart looks a lot better in terms of how he's feeling, what he's doing, what's going on for him. It looks a lot more supportive for him than Biden's. With all this said, the zodiacal releasing part, looking at this peak period coming up and then activating a major peak, a moderate peak period of his life coming up in 2025. There's a lot of information here, and there's a lot we can infer based on these correlations.
All right, so those are the archetypal themes that I'm seeing for Donald Trump during election time of 2024 in regards to his transits and his chart, as well as looking at his zodiacal releasing. If you wanted to learn more about zodiacal releasing, check out my blog post down below. I also do readings on zodiacal releasing. It's one of my favorite timing techniques ever. I use that in combination with annual perfections and transits as well, so we can get more information in detail. And I just want to preface this again by saying my information that I'm sharing with you in this video does not at all mean what I hope to be the case for the election or anything of that sort. I'm a very neutral, observant astrologer that just looks at the patterns, the correlations, and I am the messenger relaying the information. And it is my duty as an astrologer to mention this, to talk about this, because that's our job as astrologers, is to be honest, to have integrity, and to say what we see. And I do that with courage. And I, really find it's important as an astrologer to share this information. It's been a video I've been wanting to make for quite a long time. And I really wanted to make this video because if you are someone who is not happy with these archetypal predictions, it is important to be aware of what may happen in the years to come so that you can adequately prepare yourself and thus put a game plan in motion. But if there is external conflict within the US, like a civil war, an internal struggle or internal conflict, and my values are not aligned with the US, I would want to leave. I would want to be in a place where I feel I am more supported and aligned with my values. What is happening in the US does not look good in the coming years. Now, crossing my fingers that I'm wrong, crossing my fingers that all of this is going to be like nothing and it's going to be, not as hard. But if we look back in history, the last time we had Uranus return was in World War II. And the time before that was the Civil War. I mean, this is a pattern. I just wanted to be honest and share what I see, crossing my fingers that I'm wrong. And please let me know down below your thoughts, your comments. If you're an astrologer, I'd love to hear your interpretations. I'd love to, hear what you're seeing. This is something I've been looking at for a long time, and I love to study history and these patterns. And so I'd be really curious to hear what are you seeing from this. And I love learning. And as always, if you wanted to move, be sure to check out your astrocartography map and your relocated charts to determine where it's best for you to move. All right, have a magical day, guys, and I will see you soon. Bye.